The last two, I told you that I am taking you on a journey with me because I don't know really where I'm going. And two sessions back where you saw me, I talked about the kingdom and the king. And one of the things that, as the Lord was ministering to me, and I've just come here and I start sharing with you what he ministered to me, he made me realize that caught my attention was, as I was reading through Genesis and Exodus and looking at the material for this kingdom and the king, I noticed that he never claimed himself as being the king. He never did that. Not in Genesis, not in Exodus. And we even went to Samuel, and we went into the idea that when Israel chose for themselves a king, he didn't want them to have a king. He simply did not want them to have a king because they wanted a king so that they could be like all the other nations. And that was my major point of the first session, but it led to, well, what did God want? And he said, I want you to be, to me, a kingdom of priests. And that's how I ended the first one. And I had about a month to get back into the teaching. And in that month, I felt like I can't go further to what I thought I needed to go to until I addressed the fact that he wants a kingdom of priests. What does that exactly mean? And I started looking into that. And he was just feeding me information and stuff that began to be very profound to me. So stuff that may, on a surface level, we may read over it and then it's like, oh, okay, yeah. But no, it became very profound to me as what is a priest? What is his nature? What is his function? And realizing that, wow, Melchizedek was the first one to be named a priest. And then we had some other priests, and we looked at what the priest was, what was his function. And he was supposed to be the image of God, represented in the earth in a sacred space, if you will, in a temple, if you will. And that's what the Garden of Eden was. The Garden of Eden was like a temple. And in the midst of the garden, you had the tree of life. And it is there where he put Adam, and eventually he put Eve, and they were to tend it, and they were to keep it, and they were to do their work of service, of worship, and all of these things. And that's what their role was, even though he never even used the word priest. But we kind of get that idea. And basically, for me to start today, I just wanted to reiterate all those things to you, because if you haven't been through the teachings, or maybe you forgot, I would recommend you go watch those two teachings, the kingdom and the king, and then the kingdom of priests, before we get to today. So as I went through all of those teachings and sharings, I got to the point where I was kind of talking to the Lord. I said, well, if you never addressed yourself as king, if you never claimed to be king, why did you become a king? If you didn't want the Israelites to even have a king, why did you become one? There are two people in the scriptures that are an example beforehand. We call it types and shadows, if you know what that phrase means. Two people that were examples beforehand of Jesus as a king. The first one was Joseph. I'm not going to get into too much detail on Joseph, but if you look at the life of Joseph, he was an example, or what we call a type and shadow, of Jesus as the suffering king. Because if you recognize where he came from, he was, part of a family that was jealous of him and betrayed him, sold him as a slave to Egypt, and then he had to go into Potiphar's house and be falsely accused of something he never even did, and then he had to be in prison for many years, and then he was an interpreter of dreams and all of this stuff. But anyways, you know the account. He became what? He became second in the command. And so you had Pharaoh giving him all authority. He gave him all authority, like Jesus was given all authority and power. Joseph was given all authority and power in Egypt. Anybody wanted anything, they didn't go to Pharaoh, they went to him. He had all authority and power. But in order to get to that place, he had to go through a lot of suffering. And then the other person whose life was an example of Jesus as a king, but as a conquering king, was David. David was that example beforehand. So he's sharing me, he's showing me, and I'm meditating on these scriptures that, Israel's history of kings, specifically the line of Judah, it was a bloodline in which there was a covenant that was made with David the king and his seed, and his descendants. And they continued to reign, and that was to be an example of a kingdom that had no end. Because if you look at the line in the history of Israel, that kingly line never ended. It did in Israel. Remember, it was supposed to go to, it went from David, then it went to Solomon, then it went to Rehoboam. But in the Israel side, it was Jeroboam. He was supposed to be king, and God made a covenant with him, but he broke covenant. And that's why the line didn't stay with Jeroboam's descendants, because he broke covenant. But in Judah, he made a covenant with David, and that line of succession continued, and that was to be a picture and a type and a shadow of the kingdom that has no end. And so the idea of a future reigning king whose king or reign shall never end, that was decreed in some very interesting places as I looked into it. So it was decreed and it was alluded to through pagan kings. I'm going to give you two examples. King Nebuchadnezzar and King Darius. In Daniel chapter 4, it says, at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, remember when he was running around like some crazy animal, lost his mind, and then he got it back. Well, when he got it back, he lifted up his eyes to heaven, and he says, my understanding returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him who lives forever, for his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation to generation. He's alluding to the fact that the God of heaven is the one who reigns forever and ever and ever and ever. And then we get to Darius, and he's the one that put Daniel in the lion's den. Well, he said after all that, he said, I'm going to make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one that shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. So pagan kings are decreeing and alluding to the fact that God is actually the one who reigns forever and ever and ever. He's the one that has dominion forever and ever and ever. And his dominion, his kingdom will never end. The Israelites weren't saying that. It's not yet. So then I started looking into the prophets. And the decree of him being a king was directly made by the prophets in Isaiah. He said, woe is to me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the king. He was one of the first prophets to actually decree that God was king. He wasn't the first. I'm going to get to who was the first, but that was major. The idea of God being king did not come from God. It came from the recognition of his creation, recognizing who he was. Remember I made the point that the goat, he doesn't have to go around saying to everyone, I'm the goat, I'm the goat, I'm the greatest of all time. No. It's self-evident. Everybody just knows. And for God, the creator of all the living universe and all the spiritual beings and all the natural beings and heavens and the earth and the cosmos and all of these things, it's self-evident. He's God. He's king, if you will, but he's God. He's the Lord of heaven and earth. And he doesn't have to say that. He doesn't have to declare that because it's self-evident. And so there's another prophet named Jeremiah. He said, but the Lord is the true God. He is the living God and the everlasting king. Two prophets now, major prophets. We know them as the major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. Major prophets are saying that now God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he's the one that's king. And at his wrath, the earth will tremble, and the nations will not be able to endure his indignation. Okay, so we've got pagan kings alluding to the fact that he actually is the one that's in dominion. We've got now major prophets that are saying it, and it was also declared in the days of Jesus' flesh. As a matter of fact, it was declared on the day that he was born. Who declared it on the day that he was born? The angels. Spiritual beings that were created from days of old. It says in, oh, by the way, I forgot to give you all the scriptures. I'm just flowing. All right, so I got Daniel 4:34, Daniel 6:26. That's where the Nebuchadnezzar and Darius. And then Isaiah 6:5 and Jeremiah 10:10. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to get into this. All right, I told you, I'm very excited about this message. Okay, so in the days of his flesh, on the day that he was born, in Luke chapter 1, it says, and behold, the angel said, and behold, you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. This is Gabriel to Mary. And he will be great, and will be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord will give him the throne of his father David. David was the king of Israel. And now he's going to be given that throne, that line of succession. And he will reign over the house of Jacob how long? Forever. And his kingdom, there will be no end. That's what the major prophets said. This word king in the scriptures was mentioned. I had to look this up. I used a program. It's a great program, eSword. It mentioned the king 1,883 times. I'm not talking about king as God, but I'm talking about just the word king, Melech. And it was used over 2,532 times in the Old Covenant. And I literally looked through all of them. I was reading them all and trying to get a picture. That's how the Lord ministers to me. I try to get an overall picture of what is he saying, not just use one verse here and there. I'm trying to look at it all and then see what's this great grand picture that he's trying to paint for me. And then I came back to 1 Samuel. Because after the Lord had said, don't be offended, Samuel. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Because they don't want me to reign over them. Remember those words, those were kingly words. And again, he still hasn't said that he's a king, okay? And it says in 1 Samuel chapter 12, verse 17 through 19, it says, hey, isn't today the day of the harvest? The wheat harvest? And Samuel says, I'm going to call upon the Lord. And I'm going to send thunder and I'm going to send rain so that you will perceive and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord, in asking a king for yourselves. I read that because I want us to understand this was not God's original intention or plan for the Israelites. It simply wasn't. It was actually a wicked thing that they asked for this, because instead of placing their trust in God for all things, they wanted to place their trust in a man to give them protection from their enemies, to go fight the battles for them, to go take care of their crops and this and that and the other, instead of just relying upon the Lord, which they had done all of that time up to the, when King Saul was chosen. So Samuel called to the Lord, and he sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel, and all the people said to Samuel, pray for your servants to the Lord your God that we might not die. I guess it was a violent torrential thunderstorm that came. And they said, we have added to all of our sins the evil of asking a king for ourselves. So they got the message. It may not have been a longing, repenting impact, but they initially got the message that the very request of asking for themselves a king was evil in the Lord's sight. It was absolutely evil. Now, as I look through all the scriptures about this word king, and I gave you some examples, with King Nebuchadnezzar and Darius and the major prophets, it wasn't until David became king that we see a pivot in this idea of God being king. And specifically, it was in the Psalms. So listen to David's sentiments. Because he begins in the Psalms, this is while he's alive, he begins to declare and recognize, and he's the first to start recognizing that God is actually king. And so he says in Psalm chapter 2, why do the nations rage? You know this scripture. And the people, why do they plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers that take counsel against the Lord together and against his anointed. They're taking counsel. They're coming against, confronting the Lord and his anointed. But he sits in heaven and he laughs. The Lord shall hold them in deep derision. This is all in Psalm chapter 2. And he's going to speak to them in wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure. And then it quotes what God says. In verse 6, yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, you whom I've set as king on the holy hill of Zion, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. So that's a prophetic decree talking about something that's going to happen in the future. I have set a king upon my holy hill of Zion, which is also representative of the people of God, of Jerusalem. I have set myself a king. But notice, he set himself a king, and he called him his son. But he wasn't actually referring to himself. He didn't say, I've set myself as king on the holy hill of Zion. But as you start looking through it and start following along with the story, you start realizing, I know exactly now what he was talking about. But it says, you are my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you all the nations for your inheritance. And the ends of the earth will be your possession. And you're going to break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. He's prophesying over this king that he has set on a holy hill. And anything that he asked for is going to be his. All of it is going to be his. Like it says, all heaven and earth is given into my hands. All power in heaven and earth is given into my hands. And this is just another way of saying it. Now, David is the first to begin to recognize in Israel as the king of Israel. He's the rightful king of Israel. He's the anointed king of Israel. He's now recognizing, he's declaring that God has a king. And he recognizes that the Lord of heaven and earth, the creator of the cosmos, is actually the king. Because now read Psalm 5. He then further continues to evolve this idea. He says to the chief musicians with the flutes, a psalm of David, give ear to my words, O Lord. Consider my meditation. Give heed to the voice of my cry, my king and my God. He's the first to declare who truly is the rightful king and heir of all the cosmos, if you will, of all the universe. He says in Psalm 10, the Lord is king forever and ever. How long is his dominion? Forever and ever. How long will he reign? Forever and ever. So it's actually attributing it to who actually it is. It's God who is this. It says in Psalm 24, lift up your heads, O you gates, and be lifted up, you everlasting doors. Remember this word? And the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. The Lord mighty in battle. You see how he's attributing who the king is? He's saying it's the Lord. It's the Lord. Lift up your heads, O you gates. Lift up you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. So as the leader of the nation of Israel, David is now getting everyone's eyes off of him and saying, you need to look at your rightful king. He is the King of glory. Our God in heaven is the King of glory. And then if you read further, more in the Psalms, as we've been reading, if you've been reading with us this year, what are we on? Psalm 100 and something, 104 maybe? Somewhere like that? Well, if you read through the Psalms, remember the Psalms was not all written by David, right? There were also the sons of Korah. And the sons of Korah began to echo David's sentiments, because they say in Psalm 44, you are my king, O God, command victories for Jacob. It says in Psalm 47 too, the Lord Most High is awesome. He is the great king over all the earth. Again, did he make a kingdom of kings? No, it says, I want you to be to me a kingdom of priests. Who alone is the king? He's the king. And David now realizes that. And the sons of Korah are now recognizing, they're embracing the idea that wasn't ever embraced before David. It wasn't embraced during Saul's time, and before that it was the judges. It just, this idea was never talked about, that he was the king. But David brought it to pass. And then Psalm 84, even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. So now the sons of Korah are joining in this chorus, and it's starting to get amplified as you go through the Psalms. And then Asaph, remember Asaph? He's one of them. Asaph started putting this in writing. God is my king from old, working salvation in the midst of the earth in Psalm 74:12. And then another one, because not all the Psalms were told to us who wrote it, but in Psalm 95 it says, for the Lord is the great God and the great King above all gods. It was not until, what's the last book of the Bible as we traditionally accept it? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Old Testament. What? Micah? Malachi? Yeah, you be nice to him. Yeah, it's Malachi. All right, so Malachi. Now we traditionally accept Malachi as the last book of the Bible. It's the last prophet, and he spoke about, John the Baptist right at the end of Malachi. It's not actually, but it's okay. It's okay. So think about it. It was not until Malachi prophesied the words of the Lord that we first hear the Lord attribute to himself the title of a king. Listen to his words in Malachi 1:14. But cursed be the deceiver who has in his flock a male, and takes a vow, but sacrifices to the Lord what is blemished. And then it says, for I am a great king, says the Lord of hosts, and my name is to be feared among the nations. And I just found that interesting, because in what we consider the last book of the Bible before the new covenant, it says, I am the great king. That's the first time we kind of see the Lord attribute that to himself. But again, I am trying to understand, why didn't you ever attribute that to yourself before? And then why are you making that little, sprinkle of a mention that you are the great king? And then we have the new covenant. Clearly we see that he did not initially take on this title of a king and declare himself as such. So I'm thinking, well, what changed? Man's idea of a king, made in the likeness of men, is not his idea of a king. And as I said before, if you look at all the mentions of a king, the first mention of a king was these 5 kings that wanted to battle against these 4 kings. And they were fighting with each other, and they were killing one another. And this is where Abraham's Lot and family were kind of kidnapped by them, and he had to go rescue them. And then on his way back, he met Melchizedek, the king of Salem. But the first time the kings was mentioned was those. But if you look at all the kings were horrid people, taking advantage of their people, constantly fighting over this piece of land, over that piece of people, over that piece of food, over this water, over this well. I mean, there's constant fighting with these kings. And basically, they were just tribal leaders of different factions of people all around. This isn't what God wanted intended to attribute to himself, not initially. But I guess the Lord started showing me that it's not like he changed his mind. Don't get me wrong. I mean, the Lord knew what he was going to do before he did it. He knew everything that was going to happen. He knew that Adam and Eve were going to sin, and he knew that what he was going to do to take care of the sin, okay? I'm not saying he didn't know and he was surprised and then he started changing his mind. That's not what I'm saying. But there definitely was a pivot, because he ended up taking upon himself this title of a king, like he took upon himself the form of a man. When he created Adam and Eve in the garden, do you think his initial intention was, I'm going to become a man like them? There was no need for that. It wasn't until they fell that there was a need for that. So here we go. In Philippians 2, if you remember Philippians 2, it says, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let us esteem each other better than himself. Let each one of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. And I read that. We know that Paul was trying to minister to the Philippians and tell them how they need to walk about this life. But these sentiments that I'm reading right there, and if you read them again, Philippians 2, 3 through about 4, I think, that's exactly what God did. Because the reason why he became king, the reason why he became a man, is because he was looking out for all of our interests more than his own. He could have easily not done that, and then we would have easily never had an answer. We would have never been able to be rescued had he not done that. So, I see, as you continue reading 5 through 8, he humbled himself voluntarily for our sakes, because he was going to do not what was in his best interest, but what was in our best interest. That's why he became a king. When initially that was not, no, I simply reign. But he had to. So now continue reading verse 5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but he made himself of no reputation. The God of glory, the King of glory, the Lord of heaven and earth, humbled himself. He became someone who nobody really knew anything about. And he took upon himself the form of a servant or a bondservant, and he came in the likeness of men. And being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient. How long? How far? To the point of death, even the death of the cross. And so he formed himself. He fashioned a man in the womb of Mary through supernatural immaculate conception. And he chose Mary because Mary was of the line of who? David. And that's in Matthew 1. And he also put himself in the line of David through Joseph. If you read Luke 3. Because it says he was, as was supposed, the son of Joseph. That's the wording in the scriptures. He was, everybody thought, well, he's the son of Joseph. That's what they thought. That wasn't the truth. Jesus was born of a virgin, and it was born of a virgin to fulfill the prophetic word. But in order to fulfill the word of God, there was a cost, a very heavy price, to become king in the likeness of man. Now the story starts off, he was born on a certain day, and the angels came. Angels we have heard on high. Remember that song? And they were singing and they were glorifying the Lord to the shepherds and say, hey, your Savior, Christ is born. Go and check him out. Go and see him. Go and see him. That was the first day. 2 years later, about, some wise men from the east, rich guys, knew something about the stars, and knew something about the king. And they came looking for the king of the Jews. And they were looking at from about 2 years of age. And we know the rest of his life, right? He did miracles. He did signs and wonders during the days of his flesh. He healed the sick. He gave sight to the blind eyes. He gave hearing to the deaf ears. He gave speech to the mute. The lame were able to walk. He was able to deliver the oppressed of being hunched over or being stricken with the issue of blood. He was able to deliver from the possessed, the demoniac, and he was able to even raise the dead. And all of this is glorious, and all of this is wonderful, and all of these things that I just mentioned were signifying that he was not only the Son of Man, which he said countless and countless of times, he's the Son of Man, the Son of Man, the Son of Man, referring back to Daniel, but that's another story. I'm not getting into that. But he was also the Son of God. That's what all of those signs were confirming about him. He's the Son of, in other words, he's the Messiah. He's the Christ. What does that mean? The anointed one, the promised one, the one of old that we've been talking about is going to come through the line of David. He's going to raise up for himself a king. He's going to set a king in the holy Zion. And we get to his entry into Jerusalem, right? Pastor Joe has preached upon this, how, Matthew 21, all of this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of by the prophets, saying, tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, lowly and sitting on a donkey, a colt, and the foal of a donkey. Remember that message? He's sitting on the donkey and the colt? Okay. So you remember that. And what happened that day? And by the way, let me mention the fact that if you look through all the Gospels and you look at all the things that Jesus said, Jesus never referred to himself as a king. Just like God never referred to himself as a king. It was attributed to him, but he never said he was the king of the Jews. And we're going to get to that in a second. But man, that day that he came in, the multitudes, not being rich, being, I would say, middle class or even lower class of people in that society, I mean, what could they offer? Take out a palm branch and put it down on the floor. Some of them took their clothes, put it down on the floor. Why? So that he wouldn't have to walk or have his donkey and his foal walk on the floor where it's dirty and all of that stuff. They put that on the floor because that's all they had. That's all they had. They gave what they had, and they just were loudly declaring, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. They were probably singing songs, and when he had come into the Jerusalem, the whole city was moved, saying, who is that? Who is this? And the multitude says, this is Jesus, the prophet. See that? They're still not getting who he actually is. He's the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. And so they welcomed him. They welcomed him with open arms. They shouted. They declared who he was, the Son of David. That's as best as they understood. That's as best as they knew. And they remained viewing him as some sort of special prophet, like John the Baptist, just some sort of special guy. Peculiar guy, but he was special nonetheless. And he came from this no-name town called Nazareth. He came from this lowly region called Galilee. But that's a part of that humbling process that he said he put himself through. Man of no reputation. And if you read through all the Gospels up to this point, he doesn't ever refer to himself as the King of the Jews. Yet, by right of lineage, being the son of David, he had more legal right to the title of the King of Jews than the King Herod. That was during his early days, right? That's why he had to run away. He had to go to Egypt because King Herod wanted to kill him. He had more right to that throne than King Herod because he wasn't a part of the lineage, period. He was not. He was put there to kind of be a governor of the region and take care of the Jews that were there and keep them in check. He had every right to exercise kingly authority, and yet he didn't. He chose to submit to the will of God, despite the sufferings that he foresaw that came with being coronated as a king. So his responsibility on one hand to fulfill the will of God outweighed his right. Our responsibilities to God always outweigh our rights. As citizens of America, right to bear arms, right to say this, right to do that. No, our responsibility to God outweighs that far, far more. So what happened on the night he was betrayed? He was taken after that betrayal kiss of Judas. He was first taken to Annas, which was the father of Caiaphas, the high priest. And he was questioned, and he was taken to Caiaphas, and he was taken with the scribes and the elders, and all they kept digging into and trying to find out, are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God? That's all they were asking. And Jesus said to them in Matthew 26, you say it. Again, he's not attributing anything to himself. You're saying it. So I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven. And Caiaphas got angry. He went right up to Jesus' face and he took his clothes and he ripped them. He didn't rip his own clothes. He went to Jesus and he ripped his clothes. Blasphemy! Who are you to say that? You're nothing but a what? A man. How can you say that? That's blasphemy in our religious setting. You can't say that. So what do you think? He asked his scribes and his elders all around him. What do you think? Oh, he's deserving of death, they all said. And then what did they do? The scribes and the elders began to beat him. They struck him with their fists, they struck him with the palms of their hands, and they mocked him, and they said, who hit you? Who hit you? Come on, tell us. Who's the one that struck you? Prophesy to us, anointed one, Christ. So they had their time with him, and then what did they do? They sent him to the Romans. They had no they had no legal right to condemn him to death for anything that they're accusing him of. There's nothing in the law that allowed them to do that. So they had to go another route to get him to die. And so they sent him to the governor Pontius Pilate of the region. And the first thing that Pontius Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? That's an interesting question. And Jesus only answers, well, you say it. That's what he says. You read it. You say it. In John 18, verse 33, Pilate entered the praetorium. He called Jesus again. He said to him, hey, are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answered, are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you that concerning me? Because he knew it didn't come from Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate wouldn't have had that information. He doesn't know anything about Jesus. He doesn't really know anything about the Jewish and the Jewish culture and all of that stuff. So he's asking, where did you get that idea from? In other words, did the scribes and Pharisees tell you that? No, Pilate answered. Look, listen what Pilate answered. He says, hey, am I a Jew? I don't know anything about your culture. I don't know anything about your nation or your chief priests. All he did was deliver you to me. What have you done? He's just trying to figure out, what have you done that they're bringing you to me so that I have to deal with you? Jesus simply said, listen, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, well, my servants would be fighting so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now, my kingdom is not from here. So whatever they told you, that I'm the king of the Jews, hey, I'm telling you flat out, Pontius Pilate, my kingdom is not from here. Okay? So Pilate therefore said to him, wait a second, you have a kingdom and it's not of this world? So then he says, are you a king? Gosh, listen to these questions. Are you a king? Jesus said, that's what you say. He said, you say that I am a king. And then listen to his words. You say that I'm a king. For this reason, I was born. And for this cause, I have come into the world. Oh, really? You say that I'm a king, and it's for this reason that I was born, and it was for this reason that I come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone of the truth hears my voice. So what did Pilate do? Pilate didn't know what to do. His wife came to him and said, hey, you need to have nothing to do with this man. I've been dreaming about this thing. You need to get your hands off. You need to stop with this. Did he listen to his wife? No. What did he do? He hired a band of Romans to come in, a cohort, a group of Romans. And he let them scourge him. You got to put yourself there. Because All this time, God is not attributing to himself as a king. He doesn't want a king for his people. I know what it is, but I'm going to humble myself and I'm going to become a man. And I'm going to become what you want, what you think you want. Because he knew what that was going to entail, what it meant to become a king like you want in your life. And in order to do that, he had to go through what we're going through right now, this suffering king. And this group of Roman soldiers began to beat him. They were mocking him, just like the Pharisees and the scribes and the elders. They beat him with their fists. They were just laying it into him. Bam, bam. He's not fighting. Bam, they're just laying it into him. And then they have a flagellum. It's a whip. It's not very long, maybe about that long. And it has 3 strands, and on the end of the strands, it's tied up with rocks. It's tied up with some jagged, sharp edges of things that when they use it as a whip, and what they would do is they would tie him on a wooden piece, and he's bearing his back. How do I know this? The scriptures don't tell you this. But if you look in history, into the Roman history, this is what they did. They would beat you to a bloody pulp because they were trying to demean you. They were trying to use you as an example. Don't you ever come against the Roman government because this is what's going to happen. And so they beat him. He was black and blue. He was bruised all over. And they took a whip and they just began to whip him. And they talk about how, in Hebrew law or Jewish law, they don't let them whip him but 40 times. Are we talking about the scribes and the Pharisees whipping somebody? No. They didn't have that restriction. They beat you as long as they wanted to. They ripped you to shreds with that whip. Whip! And when it stuck to your back, it would bruise your back with the rocks. It would take the jagged edges and it would dig into your flesh. And what would happen when they ripped it out? They ripped out your flesh. Your back was bared. You were broken. You were battered. You were bruised. You were bloodied. They held nothing back because that's how they treated anyone who came against the Roman government. So who's this Jew? This nobody. Whack, whack, rip, whack, rip it to shreds. And then they took a crown of thorns. After they beat him, they bloodied, they stuck it on his head and they turned it in there, and jagged thorns were digging into his flesh, into his scalp, and he was too weak to say or do anything. And on top of that, they put upon him a purple robe. What we might not realize and understand is that everything that I just described that he went through was him going through a coronation ceremony to be crowned a king. Everything is there. Purple robe, only kings wore that. Only they had the riches to wear a purple robe. A crown, but they twisted it, they turned it, they perverted it, and they put a crown of thorns in his head. And while they did it, they demeaned him, and they mocked him, and they beat him, and they bruised him. And they beat him so severely, and this part I do know because the scriptures do say it. They beat him so severely. And while they were beating him, they were saying, "Hail, King of the Jews! Hail, King of the Jews!" That's what they were saying when they were beating him. This was a whole coronation ceremony of crowning Jesus King of the Jews. And they beat him so severely that it says in Isaiah 52, verse 14, "As many as were astonished at you," meaning Jesus, "his visage was marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of man." Those words right there are describing how badly beaten and broken Jesus was. You could not recognize that he was a man. It was that bad. And so after they did this, Pilate brings him out again. Crown of thorns, purple robe. I can imagine he's probably just shaking there in pain, in turmoil, in the battered, the broken. In his face, you couldn't even recognize that it was actually Jesus. He was just so beaten and broken. And he goes to the people. I don't find any fault in him. But look at what I've done to him. Is the matter settled? Can we settle the matter right now? Are we good? No. Behold the man, he says. And the chief priests and the officers, they cried out saying, crucify him. Again, they didn't have the right to crucify him, to put him to death. They didn't have no legal authority, so they had to go outside of that. Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said, take him. Crucify him, for I find no fault in him. And the fact that a Gentile could see the innocence of the man speaks volumes about how religious people who are fighting for their own authority can be so blinded to the truth. In order to get him crucified, the Jews had to conflate, meaning confuse, two ideas. So the first accusation to him is in John 19:7. He made himself to be the Son of God. Well, to the Romans, who cares? Okay, so, and? So then they changed it. In John 19:12, he made himself a king. Now, all the records show that he never referred to himself as a king. He never said he was king of anybody, king of the Jews, king of nobody. Even though he was of the line of David and could have said so, he never did. It was attributed to him. It was placed upon him. It was forced upon him. Now, to the Romans, there's only one king, right? Who's that? That's the Emperor Caesar. We can't have someone else saying that they're a king, so that gave the Romans then the right to crucify him, even though they're saying at the same time, but he's innocent. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't done anything. So we know that on the day of Passover, about the 6th hour, he said to the Jews, behold your king. And they cried out, away with him, crucify him. Shall I crucify your king, Pilate says. And the chief priests answered, we have no king but Caesar. Those words were damning, self-inflicted. Because with that, they pretty much judge themselves. But you see, those words are the same words that were spoken to Samuel. Samuel, give us a king. We want a king like all the other nations. Why? Because we don't want you to reign over us. The chief priests don't want to be reigned over by this man. No, we'd rather have this one, or rather confess that he is our man. All that I've shared with you tonight has transpired because their ancestors wanted a king like all the other nations around them. But so did they. It says in Matthew 23:2, Jesus said, listen, those Pharisees, they put themselves in the seat of who? Moses. And they ruled as kings, being in that seat. So I take you back to 1 Samuel 8 as I start to close. Give us a king to judge us. Samuel prayed to the Lord in 1 Samuel 8:6. And the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you. They have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. So according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even to this day with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. They are just as guilty. The Pharisees of that day were just as guilty as these Israelites in Samuel's day. This was the cost. And Jesus was willing to pay the ultimate price to give them what they wanted. You know, sometimes it says, there's that saying, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. Be careful what you lust for. It might cost the life of someone that truly loves you. And that's what it did with Jesus. By us lusting after something that was not good for us, resulted in an innocent man who happened to be God in the flesh come and pay the price for your evil wickedness. And I don't mean you like us, we. He paid our price. And knowing all that, he did it anyway. He gave them what they wanted, and then he turned it all around. What was meant for evil, by becoming king, he turned it for our good, that we might become citizens of the kingdom. And so there's a good twist to this. And he has a knack for doing that, because Joseph did say, what you meant for evil, God turned it around for our good. And that's what he did when he came and became king. So let that sober us as we go throughout a week and remember the great sacrifice that he did for us to do something he never even really wanted for us. Amen?